Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Martin with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined once again with Jeff Berkowitz of Public Affairs TV. Jeff and I are going to be going in depth on an issue that's very important to everyone living in the state of Illinois. But Jeff, before we get into some of the details, I want to play a section of what the governor said in his recent address to the legislature when he talked about the budget he was presenting.
I'm proud to say that this year's budget proposal is balanced and responsible. It represents some hard sacrifices and moderated spending. We're preserving the progress that we've made over the last 6 years, streamlining certain departments to do more with less, and delivering for our residents without raising their taxes.
So, Jeff, the governor says the budget is balanced. He's proud of that, but, there's some real consternation out there that the governor has been playing with the numbers so that he could claim to have a balanced budget, but that's not what a lot of the people think.
Well, it's a 70% shortfall. He should have said, we're completely irresponsible. He would say, meaning I, J.B. Pritzker, we've got actuaries on our staff at the, governor's office of management and budget. And we had a settlement agreement, the state of Illinois did back in 2013 with the SEC, the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, because Illinois had been deceiving investors when it issued bonds. And they said they would do things, and they're not. And it's back being worse. And it's untrue that his budget is balanced, because the actuaries would say he should have put $17 billion into pensions, and instead he put in less than 12. So he's 70% short. 70% shortfall, Governor Pritzker, not balanced.
Well, let me bring up, speaking of the actuaries, this is a graphic from WirePoints, and this is based on actuaries that work for the state, and they're saying that according to the pension payments that are supposed to be made to be funded, that this year's contribution should have been $16.8 billion, when in fact it was only, the governor's proposed budget is $11.7 billion. And so,
yeah, ironically, for a governor who's supposed to be pro-education, TRS, the Teachers Retirement System, was underfunded about $4 billion. $4 billion. And he supports education and he underfunds TRS by $4 billion. WTF, what's going on here?
And Jeff, let me as we're talking about here, folks, the issue that is critical to everyone is pensions. Why is that critical? Well, obviously it's critical if you are receiving a pension and you want the pension to continue. You don't want the pensions to go broke. It's critical if you're a taxpayer paying for these pensions. And what we have right now is a crisis that no one is really addressing. It's been out there for decades. It's not just the creation of Governor Pritzker, but at some point, the governor and the legislature need to address this issue and get down to brass tacks. I want to bring up, we're going to play a couple of clips from a recent panel discussion that former Representative Jeannie Ives had with Ted Dabrowski of WirePoints and the Orland Park Mayor Keith Penko. But Jeff, let me just bring up a slide that from that discussion. And this is, people I know are shocked because I put this up on Facebook for people to comment. These are teachers' pensions, 10 of the highest pensions in the state. And you see that each one of these individuals is making over $300,000 a year. And I would say that the average Social Security pension is about $25,000 a year.
Terry, excuse me, but these are not teachers. They might have been former teachers at one point, but they became superintendents. Certainly the guy on the bottom of the list, but not the bottom of the numbers, Hank Bangser, I know well because he was the New Trier superintendent. And I imagine the others are superintendents. I don't know them all.
Okay, so they are, we might say education, top 10 education pensions.
That would be better. Top 10, top educator pensions. Although it's hard to.
A good distinction that you brought up, and that is good to know.
Yeah.
But it remains that the taxpayers are funding these. And as we look at the age of retirement, that middle column, every one of those individuals, except for one, retired in their 50s. And with Social Security, one would have to be in closer to 70. The payment or the pension for Social Security now would start at about 67 for most individuals and is creeping up. So that is just one indication. Are these pensions that we just showed you where people are making $300,000 a year, are they representative of all the pensions? No, they're not. But what it does show is that these people did not put in anywhere near the amount of money, even with the state's contributions, to have those size pensions funded. And so they are not funded by contributions. They are funded by every year. The state has to cough up more money out of the general revenue fund, which, if these pension plans were properly funded, you would have put enough money aside to pay for the benefits you're getting. But they're not structured, and that's what is really causing all sorts of problems for the government to pay these every year, and we're shortchanging other spending that we might, maybe filling some of these
Terry,
potholes that we have so much of this time of year.
as you say, always headline, so we don't get too distracted here. Yes, pensions are the problem, but they're not the root of the problem. The root of the problem is the government salaries across the effing country, not just for teachers, but for fire, but for police, but for state employees, for city employees. State and local federal government spending is excessive because we are paying way more than the market would pay them if there were a market here. And their salaries are too high. And when you will say, well, their pensions are high because their salaries were low. No, they've got way more from the get-go. They're getting way more from the get-go, and that's continuing. The salaries, the pensions, who? Government workers. And why are they getting more? Because we have legislators who hand them monopoly power, market power. In Illinois, it's worse, but it's bad around the country. We give them market power, and they use that market power to get excessive wages, excessive pensions through the same legislators, through the same government, federal, that gives it to them. And and what do the politicians get? They do this because they get contributions back from the teachers' unions. It's a
Well,
symbiotic
not just the teacher union,
system.
from the unions.
For unions in general, but the teachers' unions are the worst, Terry, because not too long
You're
ago,
bringing
it's
up
probably
a
true.
separate issue. I mean, it's a good issue, but I don't want what we're talking about, to make it sound like we're leaping into an attack on unions. That's not the point of this conversation.
Public sector, excuse me, Terry, excuse me for 1 minute. Public sector unions are the problem, not trade unions, not
Okay,
private
watch you,
problems.
you're shaking
Public
your camera
sector
here
unions.
excessively.
Okay,
so
sorry about that. Public sector
let me get a
unions
statement
are the
in before
problem.
you step on it. We're not making an attack on unions per se, but I would say, obviously, in the private sector, unions in the private sector are only something, I think, less than 15% of the workforce. In the public sector is where you have most of the people in the nation who are unionized are in the public sector. And as you said, those payments are high. I'll give you my own one of the experiences. This goes back about 25 years ago or so, when I was doing local TV news. We had one of our cameramen who was making about $25,000 a year in central Illinois, but he got a job with the state doing camera work as he had been doing for local TV. His salary went from $25,000 to $80,000. And in addition to these pensions, Jeff, and again, these are not representative. When you and I did a story on pensions about, 10 years ago, and we talked to the head of AFSCME at the time, Henry Bear, if I remember his name, he said the average pension was about $30,000. Again, 10 years ago, that's still way more than what the Social Security people get. And the other thing
I
is,
don't
if I
think-
might, this is important.
Yeah.
The other thing is, aside from these pensions, the recipients are getting free health care for life. That's certainly not what anyone in the private sector is getting. So we're trying to say, what are the impact on the state, on Illinois cities, on Illinois homeowners, on commercial buildings? All of these people, all of those are people who are impacted mightily by these pension costs that are, and I'll finish with this. When Rod Berkowitz became governor about 20-something years ago, pension payments in the state budget were about 5% of the budget. Today, they're in the neighborhood of 26% of the state budget. And don't forget, over that period of time, what the state spends has exploded a lot.
Actually, there's a few corrections now. When you start with the last, not 26%, at least my figures on fiscal year 26, is that the state pensions are running about 20%. Small difference, but a difference.
Well, they've gone up
And it's large.
quite a bit. It used to be more.
They have gone up.
I
but
don't
the
know
other
if
correction-
you're accurate or not, but let's just say they have gone up to where they are.
I know I'm accurate.
They are.
I know I'm
Can
accurate.
I finish a
okay?
statement?
No, we should
But
keep
Jeff,
making statement
please,
after statement.
if I might. The point is that the payments by the state to pensions has gone up dramatically. It goes up by billions of dollars. Need I remind you that it's here, $17 billion nearly is what we should be paying. They're not paying that. They're paying $11.7 billion. But it's costing the taxpayers more every year at the state level. I want to play a clip from this panel that Jeannie Ives recently had, and we'll hear from Ted Dabrowski of WirePoints, where he's talking about the impact of pensions on the state.
It's right now, pension debts have destroyed this state. It's what's behind the highest property taxes in the country. It's what's behind people leaving. It's what's behind, in the last 20 years, the worst home value growth in the country. There's so many problems tied to these pensions, and at the root of it is that we, the people, are becoming subservient to our public servants because they have all the power, and part of that power is showing up in their pensions. It creates massive problems for Illinois. It's why we're losing people, and the only way we fix the state is if we, reduce those powers of the unions, and part of that means, clawing back the pensions.
So there you have it, as Ted Dabrowski points out. I mean, we're having impact across, and he was saying, kind of what you were saying, that until the state tackles this, and be maybe harder-nosed negotiators when it comes to these pension costs, nothing's going to change. And what we see is that 420,000 people have left the state, as he says, in the last 4 years. And when you have that many people leaving, those are taxpayers, those are people who are making contributions to the economy. So it's having a dramatic impact across the board.
Well, but what Ted Dabrowski would say, because he said it on my program, pensions, bad as they are, excessive salaries for government workers and excessive pensions are a symptom of a broader problem. And that broader problem, which I started to say before, is public sector union monopoly power. And that is handed to the public sector unions by in Illinois legislature, but similar in other states. And again, it's a countrywide problem, but it's worse. It's worse in Illinois than anywhere else. That's why in so many rankings that are relevant, we are number 48, number 49, number 50 out of the states. And we are worse because we have had corrupt government here that's worse than most of the other states. And it hands this power, the legislature hands the power to the public sector unions. And it's been going on not for 10 years. Bear was wrong. He was wrong when he said 10 years ago. This has been going on longer than a decade.
It really goes back 30 years or even more.
Absolutely.
Because we talk about Governor Edgar and the Edgar ramp, and he tackled this back in trying to make changes to it. Well, he was trying to make changes to it back in the mid-90s because it had become a problem building up before him. So
And
this
it did,
this is
Terry.
this goes back, I don't know, Jeff, at least 50 years, if not longer.
Well, yeah, and the Edgar, I don't want to attack him now. He's, diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. We all care and wish Governor Edgar well, but facts are facts. He made the problem worse. This thing is known as the Edgar Plan, the Edgar Rant that started in 95. Governor Edgar was governor from 1990 to 1998, very popular governor. So that Edgar Plan, the Edgar ramp, ends in 2046.
I would
He
remind
made it
people
worse.
that
He made it
it was a
worse.
bipartisan plan. I mean, the Democrats held the House, so
Of course,
this
yeah,
was
it was, of
something that
course.
had to
Yeah.
be negotiated, and certainly you can't put all of it on Governor Edgar. And then
Oh, no, I didn't mean
afterwards,
to.
we should
I-
mention that Governor, not Quinn, but Ryan, when you're trying to balance
Ryan
the
made
budget,
it
had
worse.
an
He
accelerated
made it worse.
retirement, which changed the numbers that were projected.
Well, go ahead, Mr. Mader. No, I did not mean to blame at all. Of course not on Governor Edgar. I just said he had a part in that.
He had a part.
and
Let me
maybe it
let
was
me
a
move
seminal
along though,
role.
because
That
I
was
want to
all.
get this clip in. We talk also from the breakthroughideas.com is Jeannie Ives' group, and she put together this panel. I want to play this clip by Orland Park Mayor Keith Penkow, where he is talking about the impact on municipalities. And I know he doesn't speak just for himself. I've worked with the Illinois Municipal League for the years, and these pension costs at the local level, where you have fire and police, primarily is the cost of the pensions at the local level. And it hits, whether it's Chicago, Orland Park, or smaller communities. It's always an issue. Let's listen to this bite.
Our pension payments have gone from $5 million for IMRF and police to 8.2. It's a 64% increase in 8 years. I mean, it's unsustainable. And that 3.2, we have to do something. You either have to raise property tax, you have to cut, 5% of your budget. And when you've already cut everything to where you can for services, what do? You do that? Do you increase your home rule sales tax? I mean, there's something that you have to do to pay this, because these are required mandatory payments. It's not like you can short your pension system. So it just creates a bigger problem. So at the end of the day, your property tax and the taxes that you pay, you are funding these pensions for people to basically retire at 55 and retire comfortably for the rest of their lives, where you're going to be working until you're 80.
The mayor said it very well, and this is what's driving up the costs. If you're a mayor, you can't control the payments. You got to make these pension payments to your fire and police pensions, but then you're stuck. You're either going to be raising the sales tax in the city. You can't cut the pensions. It really puts a squeeze on everyone in trying to run and balance your budgets, including the taxpayers.
Well, let me correct in a sense, or amend or supplement with what the mayor is saying there, the mayor of Orland Park, is that we need to live in a world in Illinois in which you have three choices. He said, look, you got to make these pension payments, so you're going to either have to raise taxes, and we know those are already going through the roof, property taxes, sales taxes, income taxes, individual, corporate. You got to raise taxes, or you got to cut spending somewhere else. You got to cut education spending. You got to get police. You got to cut fire, any of these government spending. But it should be, Terry, it should be that the choice is, you have a third choice, you can cut pension benefits. But we can't, because we live in a state in which, written in our Constitution, now given even more power, is the statement that you can't, as construed by the Illinois Supreme Court, you cannot cut pension benefits. Once they get a benefit, it goes forever, okay? Goes forever. Even if they haven't received it yet, it will accrue and go, and then it'll be compounded and it can't be changed. So you cannot fix the system unless you amend the Constitution, or you make a minor fix when the Illinois legislature, which has the power, gives the power to the cities to file for bankruptcy. In particular, Chicago, which is a major city with its taxpayers being on the hook for $95,000 per household. That's what they would need to pay to catch up. And so my point is, just again, the choice should be, it isn't now, it should be cut spending elsewhere, raise taxes, or cut pension benefits. Because when you got Hank Bangser getting 400K for the rest of his life, the man, I know him, nice guy, but not worth it, not worth it, and the others not worth it, and they should be cut. Those pension benefits. I'm sorry, people say a promise is a promise. No, not when the
Let
promise
me
was
insert
ill-gotten.
number one. The legislature, because of what you just said, this is in the Constitution, they can't cut the pensions unless they amend the Constitution. So when we say, why don't you guys just cut back on spending, when it comes to those pension payments, whether you're a legislator or a governor or the mayor, you can't cut back. Although the governor, in a sense, kind of did cut back by fudging the numbers and didn't follow his actuaries, as we already showed you. But it's just really a crushing problem. I want to get to recently Republican State Representative Dan Ugasti had a press conference with some other members, and he talked about the impact of the property taxes that have to go up to be paying these pensions.
But on property taxes, we have information which shows the average American family pays slightly less than $3,000 a year in property taxes, about $2,969. However, here in Illinois, we're paying over $6,000, $6,285. And with this tax adding to the cost of home ownership, it's no wonder the state has lost 420,000 residents since 2020.
So there you go, folks. If the property taxes seem high to you in Illinois, you're right. As he said, they are at least twice, or on average, twice as high as in some of the other states there. And I can tell you, I personally would be happy if I was only paying $6,000. My property taxes personally in the Springfield area have almost doubled in the time that I've been living here. And it is the case, Jeff, as we've seen in other states, where seniors who want to stay in their homes are getting priced out of their homes, even though they've already paid off their mortgages.
Well, again, let me just remind people what I said again. This is very important as you start talking about cities and the problems they're having. Is property taxes are a city problem, county problem. The Illinois legislature has it within its power. The Constitution allows it to do this, to allow all the cities in the state of Illinois, and many cities in other states already have this power, to file for bankruptcy. And once they have the power, it doesn't mean they necessarily will, but they will have leverage to go to the stakeholders, to go to the unions, to go to the bondholders and say, look, we're in trouble. We can file for bankruptcy. We have that power, but then everything's in the hands of a judge and the council and so forth. You guys and ladies want to make a deal now. Will you help me? I'll help you. You're not going to get 100 cents on the dollar, but you're not going to get zero. We'll give you something. We'll try to be reasonable. But we can't do that until the Illinois legislature gives Chicago and the other cities, and many of these small cities would benefit from having the power to file for bankruptcy. Even as I just said, they might not. They would just use it as a lever. Remember, I mentioned WirePoint says every household in the city of Chicago is on the hook for $95,000. That would be catch up with what they owe on these pensions. You can't do it. You got to allow, and that power, even if you don't amend the Constitution in Illinois, when you can file for bankruptcy, a federal bankruptcy judge has priority over that clause in the underlying Constitution. So the bankruptcy judge has the power to cut these pension benefits, to cut bondholder benefits, etc. And nobody's talking about this, but Sheila Weinberg, Truth in Accounting, she'll be talking about it to Jeff Berkowitz.
Well, and Jeff,
in the next
very
few
few
weeks, and you'll see
people
that
in the
on interview.
media ever bring this up. You and I do. Jeannie Ives, who was a former state rep, she brings it up. But where's the major stations in Chicago? They could be doing an hour-long special on this, and they ought to. The Chicago pensions are on the road to bankruptcy. They keep as much as we are paying, these pensions are greatly underfunded. And so the recipients who are getting these pensions ought to also wake up and say, unless we alter these pensions, you may wake up one day and there's not going to be any more money in the account to be making these payments that you rely on.
And let me just correct myself briefly. Sheila Weinberg will be emphasizing something that's very important that we're talking about here, how much the annuities say have to be put into these pension funds, that annuity requirement or annuity determined contribution, which is 17 billion on 12 billion. That's to make these things able to make these payments in the future. It may not be possible, but the point is that's her emphasis. I misspoke. The gentleman who made this point about the power to file for bankruptcy, Jamie Sprayregan, and he was on a show that's posted on YouTube chat on the
On
Illinois
both of
channel.
our
Thank you very
channels,
much.
the
Yeah,
interview
thank
you
you very
did,
much, Terry
he
Martin.
talked
You
about,
can
listen, I
find it
want to
there.
get this
Yeah.
other clip in from Representative Ugasti, because he's talking about not only the impact on seniors, but the impact on commercial buildings and real estate. And before you say, well, boo-hoo, it's also the impact on the valuations of your homes. Let's listen.
High property taxes are regressive. They hurt seniors and those who can afford them the least, the most. An example I'll give you is something I've talked about before. It's commercial building in Lansing. A property owner of a commercial building had a deal to sell the building for $300,000. That's the value, market value. It's what he could get for the building. New property tax bill comes out at $60,000 for the property. It canceled the deal. No one wants to pay for their building a second time to the government over a 5-year period of time.
So again, Jeff, it impacts businesses, as we just heard. It impacts homeowners. And as he said, I want to emphasize, when you have a senior and you're living on Social Security, you're no longer having that salary you used to have. When your property taxes go up every year, that property tax is not tied to your ability to pay that tax as your income tax is. So you're kicking these people out of their homes.
No, and Terry, it's not just the seniors. I just want to make that point. 2 points. It's not just the seniors. People who are way short of being senior are having to leave their homes and find a more inexpensive neighborhood that has been less excessive in its salaries to government employees like fire, like police, like teachers, like superintendents, because they can't afford the property taxes either, even if they have an income coming in. And you look at the south side of Chicago, they're all over. There are these excessive government salaries, mayors and so forth that are getting paid. And it's just getting, there's the word, I'll just say it, it's getting pissed away. And they're pissing away the taxpayer money. And these, especially many of these are minority neighborhoods that are in major trouble. They can't have the policing they need because it's all going into pensions and excessive salaries. And so this is not a senior problem. And as I said, this is a
Well,
major Illinois
it's
problem.
not just
and
a
it's a
senior
major
problem. It
America
is a
problem.
senior problem.
Yeah.
Look, again, I'm going to emphasize, because I can just hear critics going, oh, you guys, you're radical right wing talk. Look, folks, this is math. This is math. The governor knows the math. The actuaries know the math. Jeff and I are not making this up. The problem persists, and it's not going to go away. And if it isn't addressed, the only way is you, as an Illinois citizen, can get relief. If they don't change it at the state level and say, yes, we have to address this, we have to change the Constitution, then the only way you can get relief is to flee the state. As Representative Ugasti earlier brought up, that 420,000 people have left the state, or actually it was maybe Ted Dabrowski brought that up, in the last 4 years. And people will continue to leave, and not just the average taxpayer, but businesses who are being taxed, as we just heard, are going to be fleeing the state. And Jeff, actually, we have really to go. We went pretty long. Folks, give us your comments. Sorry to cut you off, Jeff, but we'll see you next week.